Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth and last session of our series on mission. Hearts on fire, feet on the move. It has been, I don't know how it has been for you, but it has been enriching and moving to pray about the gift of Jesus's mission and to enjoy the gift of faith and renew the commitment to be missionaries and sharers of God. Good news, especially to those closer to us. We cannot end this series without praying about God's invitation to each of us to pick up the courage to assume the call to be witnesses. Prayer, as we might know by now, is not about topics or ideas. It is about connecting with God's heart and being moved by his desire to be present to those who search for him and who want to see what a life led by God's love looks like. Quite stressful, no? As Pope Francis encourages us in his 2022 World Mission Sundays message, he says, in evangelization, the example of a Christian life and the proclamation of Christ are inseparable. One is at the service of the other. They are the two lungs with which any community must breathe if it is to be missionary. It is interesting that he puts this example, two lungs with which any community, this community, must breathe if it is to be missionary. If we want to be a missionary community, we need to live and to proclaim. And so it's our turn to be witnesses. Our world needs credible witnesses of God's love, which moves us to proclaim his word with our words and our actions. Not because it is easy, but because it is the consequence of our encounter with Christ. We witness as the fruit of our encounter with him in prayer. And that's why these moments of coming together, praying with the word, are key in order for us to be witnesses. Today, for our time of prayer, we are taking the passage of Peter's encounter with Jesus after the resurrection at the shore of Lake Galilee. After Jesus' death and resurrection, he came to meet Peter personally by the shore of Lake Galilee, as he comes to encounter each one of us at the shore of our lives, whatever the situation we might be living, whatever the situation might be. Jesus took the initiative to have a dialogue with Peter. As we know, Peter's last recorded words about Jesus before this episode were the words of his denial, when he was asked 3 times, and he said, I do not know him. I don't know who is he. It looks like a complex situation when 2 good friends meet after one betrays the other. And perhaps they didn't know how to start a conversation, right? So they started talking about food. Jesus brought the food, the fish and the bread. So they started talking about food. Our time is not different. We live in a time marked by too many complexities, in which some people choose to be involved and take initiatives, yet an increasing majority decides to remain on the surface, untouched by others' suffering or needs, because there is this assumption that others are doing something about it, hence we can carry on living our own lives. Sadly, selfishness has become a value in our time. So in this passage, we see how Jesus does not give up on his friend Peter. He came personally to meet Peter, to renew the call to mission that he had previously extended to him. Perhaps in his own eyes, Peter thought of himself as a failure for having denied Jesus. And maybe he believed that Jesus' call was over because he proved to be unreliable when his life was at stake. So this episode in the gospel becomes so much needed for all of us, Jesus' followers. because we all, at one point, shy from giving testimony about Jesus' love and faithfulness in our lives. When we fear to voice our support for someone who is normally ostracized, or want to be honest when everyone else shies away from the truth. Jesus' invitation to be credible witnesses of his life remains even more relevant when faced with these complexities of our time. His message is not superficial. On the contrary, it goes to the heart of the realities we live and experience, and the realities we fear and sometimes wish to avoid. One of them is loneliness. We are also sent to bring Christ's presence and love where poverty, suffering, and the pain and loneliness are often unseen, yet very much present. Mother Teresa said, the most terrible poverty is loneliness and the feeling of being unloved. We might think that mission only takes place in certain places and realities, where there is poverty, when there is evident need. Yet, the poverty Mother Teresa spoke about is devastatingly present in our midst. In the passage, Peter was saved from aspiring too little in his life as he went back to his old life and thought everything was over because he had denied Jesus. And I'm sure he was feeling terribly lonely and terribly low after denying his good friend. In our time, many people also suffer from the terrible poverty of loneliness or feeling unloved because they have done something wrong or do not measure up to the standards or expectations of people. Many live more with their thoughts and overwhelming feelings of inadequacy than with the joy of friendship or a supportive parent or grandparent. And that is a terrible poverty, and that exists in our midst. The good news we are sent to proclaim in our lives and through our words is the reality that in baptism we were made a temple of the Holy Spirit. And that is the truth of our faith, that God dwells in us, that we are not alone. In every situation in life, whether disappointments, frustrations, or joys, we can turn to God and we will find him present. We will find him there in the realities we live. The good news is that there is a way of escaping the poverty, loneliness, and the feeling of being unloved. As we see in the gospel, Jesus came to encounter Peter and to offer him forgiveness when he was experiencing that terrible loneliness of having denied his friend. By entrusting his mission to him, Jesus gave him again the confidence that he was his friend. That personal experience of forgiveness, of receiving a new opportunity despite mistakes and failures, is good news. The good news many people around us long to hear and receive. As we heard in the opening hymn, God is asking us, God says, I, the creator of all that exists, suffer in the pain of my people, suffer in their loneliness, suffer in their being unloved or feeling unloved. I have heard the cry of my people, but whom shall I send to tell them that they are not alone? Who will go to tell them? Jesus sends us as witnesses to his love and commitment to our lives. Often we are asked, do you believe what you preach? Do you preach what you believe? Well, I don't know about you because maybe you do not preach that often, but I'm a preacher of the word. And sometimes these questions might be implicit when people want to see and find out if we really preach what we believe, if the faith that we have in Jesus is something that we proclaim, or if it's really true that I believe in what I preach. Some of the words increasingly used in our contemporary vocabulary are to verify, to authenticate, double check, etc. Because there are too many scams. And some people are out there to cheat others with their stories or false claims. Yet, I can say, and we can say in our own lives, that we truly believe in Jesus and we truly share what we are convinced about the love of God. To be credible witnesses to the gospel means that by looking at our lives and listening to our words, can see and hear that there is coherence between what we say and what we live. That doesn't mean that we are perfect. That our lives are perfect or problem-free or stress-free, because in fact, when people want to know if what you say is true or what you believe is what you preach, can be stressful, isn't it? Or that because we follow Jesus, it doesn't mean that because we follow Jesus, everything is smooth sailing and that everyone likes us. That's not true. That would be the ideal situation, right? But no, not everyone likes us, and we all experience that, right? It simply means that we are challenged to live and believe that even if we go through anguish and worry, we are not alone. One of the experiences in my life when I felt very helpless and in need of hope, because I felt I was in need of hope. And when my faith and trust in God were tested, I'm sure that you want to hear when was that, right? It was a few years ago when one of my sisters in the community had to go through an open heart surgery. Like out of the blue, right? First you see her like healthy. We didn't even know that she had a heart problem. And the next thing you know is that she has to undergo an open heart surgery. I remember the operation lasted for 4.5 hours. I experienced during these 4.5 hours so much anguish and fear because it was a situation, a life-threatening situation, right? A very delicate operation. And I just couldn't, I just couldn't feel otherwise. I remember how exhausting and mind-draining these 4.5 hours were. This is how it feels when we worry for someone we love, or when you worry for someone you love and want to do something, and yet you know that there is nothing you can do but to trust and wait. And these are the experiences that put our trust and our love and our faith in God to the test. And we all have gone through experiences like this, when the only thing that is left to us is to trust and wait. Yet the most consoling words that I experienced during these hours came from that moment of prayer when I told God, she is in your hands. Of course, she's in the hands of the doctors, but she is in your hands. And you love her more than all of us. And there were many of us who were praying for her. And I asked God, please answer our prayer. That prayer was answered when the doctor came to talk to us after the operation. He came, and normally you can see, right, from the face of the person, if it's good news or it's otherwise. And the doctor just looked exhausted. And he came to talk to us after the operation and told us that all went well and that she was okay. We dare to pray with those without words because their pain is too deep. We dare to hope when others give up because our faith in Christ invites us to hope against all hope. And that is what we call miracle. We all have experienced big or small miracles in our lives. That is what faith is. That's what faith means, right? To wait and hope. Wait in God and hope in Him. To be credible witnesses to the gospel means that we go through all the situations everyone else goes through, yet not alone. or wanting to control situations at all costs, which is absurd because it is impossible. There are so many situations that escape our control. That was Peter's experience. He who thought he could follow Jesus to the end and stand firm ended up denying the master. He was not in control of the situation and did not know how to trust God's ways, which are so different from the world's. To be credible witnesses means that we place our trust in God and let go of that desire to control, which too often leads to frustration and disappointment. After Peter had eaten the fish, because we said that they started a conversation about food since they couldn't do anything else, right? And we are not British, we don't talk about the weather, we talk about food. After Peter had eaten the fish and the bread that Jesus prepared, Jesus asked Peter 3 times, Peter, do you love me? Because if you remember, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And 3 times Jesus asked him. He wanted to heal him from that experience of feeling down because he denied the master. He asked him, do you love me more than these others do? Peter answered, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. These 3 words that Peter uttered, you know everything, encapsulate Peter's experience of poverty, weaknesses, inconsistencies, incoherences, and perhaps the lack of trust he saw himself capable of, in his life. Even though he had witnessed Jesus' miracles and his powerful words and deeds, he denied Jesus 3 times. And Jesus asked him 3 times, do you love me? At that moment, when Jesus asked him, Peter experienced that Jesus was restoring him from within. To be credible witnesses to the love of God and his gospel, we need to recognize that we, like Peter, are not perfect. And we, like Peter, need to acknowledge in humility that the power to be followers, to be missionary disciples, and to be witnesses of Christ is in God and not in us. Then and only then can Jesus confidently say to us, as he told Peter, feed my sheep. Then we will fearlessly preach with our words and our actions because we are God's instruments, not the protagonists of the mission. So let me end this reflection with Pope Francis's words. He says, this complete, consistent, and joyful witness to Christ will surely be a force of attraction for the growth of the church in the 3rd millennium. I exhort everyone to take up once again the courage, frankness, and parrhesia of the first Christians, to bear witness to Christ in word and deed in every area of life. So as we take this time to pray in silence, to read the word, let us accept Jesus' invitation and Pope Francis's invitation to pick up the courage to witness to Christ's love through our lives, through our actions.